Hi, this is a quick guide on replacing struts. I have a 1999 Oldsmobile that I'm going to be replacing the rear struts on. It's always a good idea when you replace your struts that you do it in pairs. You don't want to just do one side, like the left side, and not change the right side, because your left side is the strut that had the problem. So this should be a pretty quick job. Should probably be 30-45 minutes. I've only done this once before, but pretty much with every car, and it was on a Honda. No, I'm sorry, not a Honda. It was on a Saturn, so it was also another American car. But they're pretty much all. It's pretty much generic when you do it on how to replace them for every car. It's pretty much a similar process. Let's get started. I'm gonna first show you where to put the jack. Where the jack point is to lift the rear side, the back side. I'm just gonna use the cross member. That's pretty much like in the middle of the car, but in the back side, so that way I can just lift the whole rear up as one, and then put the jack stands, and then just put the jack stands on either side, and then from there we'll get started on the process of disassembling the strut from the steering knuckle, and on the top where it's connected to where it's inside of the trunk frame over here. Alright, so let's get started. Right now I'm underneath my car, and if you're going, or at least for the Autozone, if you're going straight from the back, you start moving up, you're gonna start like that. This is where I'm gonna put the jack point on the cross member. It's right next to the, I guess, a curve on the exhaust, and it's right in the middle of the rear part of the car. It's probably 3 feet from the rear bumper, maybe 2 or 3 feet from the rear bumper. And I should have mentioned before I started, safety first. Always try to be safe. Before I started using the hydraulic jack, before I did anything, I had put, well, you could use wheel chocks, but I just used rocks. And since I'm lifting up the rear end of the car, I put rocks in front of the front tires to prevent rolling. And if you were working on the front end, from the front end of your car, you would put wheel chocks on the back end of your tires, and you would put your emergency brakes on to help prevent any rolling, just to be, I guess, doubly sure. And you want to wear some shop gloves, some protective, or any type of protective handwear, some protective eyewear, and that's about it. Pretty much, you just want to be safe whenever you do any type of work around your car. So, and also, after you lift up your car with your jack, you want to put some jack stands. Some steel or aluminum jack stands that are greater than the weight capacity of your car. For example, this car weighs, I believe, 32 to 3,500 pounds, and the jacks that I'm going to be using are rated for 3 tons, which is 6,000 pounds. So they're well above the weight capacity of my car. So let me go ahead and start lifting the car up. And again, it's put the shop light under there. There you go. And it's right there. It's connected right there in the cross member. And that's how I'm looking at the rear end of the vehicle. Alright guys, so I'm gonna try out this. For me, it's a new pneumatic impact wrench. I got this at a garage sale for $10, so it's just a really good deal. It's an old Craftsman. I normally use my older electric impact wrench, which gets everything loose, tires, both the C's, and I'm using even a breaker bar. This thing gets it loose, and I've had this, I bought this at Autozone. I believe at the time was, yeah, for around like between 40 and 50 bucks. But it works amazing, and as you can see, it's really old, so it's seen its better days, but it's worked for me. It's really saved me in a lot of situations where I couldn't get bolts off, or if I already had the tire up in the air and I didn't want to drop it so I can loosen the lug nuts. That saved me from having to drop the car and taking the bolt off and then having to lift it up again. So it's a pretty useful tool. But I'm gonna try this today. I have my small, I believe this is a, yeah, I believe it's a 10-gallon tank air compressor, and that's what I'm gonna use today. Okay, so this Oldsmobile has a lug cover or axle nut cover. Either way, it has a little plastic cover that's covering the lug nuts, and it's covering the axle nut that I gotta get off first. These you want to hand tighten and loosen with your hands. No need to use any type of pneumatic tool, any type of impact wrench or anything that's just going to break it. And once it's loose, once you got those off, you don't have to take this off any further, because you can just grab the lug nuts from there. So once you got them off, you can take this off or pulling it off if you want, but there's no need. I'm just go ahead, attach that, put the pneumatic wrench on it, and then I'll go ahead and remove the tire. Alright guys, so the air impact wrench, the pneumatic impact wrench did not work, so I connected my electric impact wrench and even connected to multiple adapters for multiple lines, and my air compressor still on. The light also is attached to this, and my half drive electric impact wrench still takes it off like it was nothing. So like I said, 40 to 50 bucks at Autozone. Hopefully they still carry it. The last place I went to was DAS Auto Parts, and they had this. I did not check the price, but I do believe it was, if I remember right, then the price was still around 45 to 50 bucks. And this is really worth it, guys. It's really heavy duty, and it's definitely worth it to buy. Alright guys, so the tire's off, and so this is the strut. And so this is the strut, that part right there that goes up, and it goes into the trunk cabin. Let me see. Alright, so I thought that the coil was going to be bad. The coil seems fine, but if you can see closely, let me see if I can. Well, let me take off my shop glove so I can zoom in with my camera. Okay, so like I was saying before, if you can look in there, get the light. No, it's not showing. There you go. If you could see in there, you could see a fluid inside of the on the strut, and that's the hydraulic fluid from the strut that is leaking out. So this shock is bad. Another way to test it was, I probably should have showed you guys before when the tire was on and the car was on the ground. If you can push down on your car and it doesn't go up right away after that one initial bounce, and it continues to bounce 2 or 3 times, it means that shock is bad. And if it makes a heavy creaking noise when you do that, then that means your coil is broken. So that's basically what you're trying to look for, any type of leak. See if you can see a little bit closer to the left side, it's dry, and on the right side it just looks shiny. That's the fluid, the hydraulic fluid that's leaking down. Let me zoom out. Alright. But yeah, it's old. Like I said, I've never worked on the rear side of the car, on the rear tires. And yeah, this is pretty rusted out. You can look, so that's a strut. So this is where it connects to the, I guess it's still called a steering knuckle. I mean, there's a two-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, so the steering will be in the front. But I'm gonna just call it the steering knuckle. So this is the strut. Right there. So this is the strut, And these are the two bolts. And these are the two bolts that you want to get out. So you can either put vice grips in the back, which I don't think there's much of any room in, or just put a socket on the back there, and or a key wrench, and just get a socket here and break it loose. I'm gonna soak it in some oil. I forgot what it's called, PB blaster. I wouldn't use, in something like this, I wouldn't use WD-40. I would use PB blaster to really get that loose, to try to eat away at the old metal, because it's really rusted up. And then from there, once you get those off, this is the switch link right there that connects to the strut as well. And it looks like it's just an Allen wrench in there, and yeah, so just an Allen wrench. This is I don't know why I went to the back. The back is just a rubber dust boot, an Allen wrench there, and then a key. Looks like it might be a 17mm, and then just an Allen wrench right there. And then from there, that's it. So you got to take off. So you got to loosen, strut. Oh, and then on the top there's 1, 2, 3 bolts. You take off, and then that's it. And then the strut comes off, and you put in the new one, and you pretty much just work backwards from there. The way that the steps that you proceeded to take the strut off, you just work that backwards. But as you can see from my brake disc, it's very rusted out. This would also be a good time to check your brake pads. Let me see if I can do it here. Kind of focus in. It's got some brake pads on there. The back one is good. Let's see the front. Well, they're replaced in pairs, so if the back one is good, then I need to. There we go. You can see the back. Back seems good as well. So the brakes are good. But if you look, just taking a look. I was just trying to see for you guys. If you take a look at the brake dust cover for the brake disc, it's pretty rusted out. It's pretty bad. Now what could happen there is if you're driving and you see if you're driving and you hear a screeching noise every single time you drive, regardless if it's in if you hit the brakes, regardless if you're driving and you don't have your foot on the gas pedal, but you always hear a screeching noise, chances are it's this. This is so rusted out, and I'm not sure how it happens, but this gets so rusted out that instead of it being completely parallel with the brake disc, it starts indenting forward, and it starts touching the brake disc, and that's how you get that screeching noise. So it's basically metal on metal noise. It sounds a bit sharp. It sounds more sharper than when you're using you're using brakes that have no brake pads on them. And as opposed to that scenario where using brakes that had no pads on them, you would only hear a screeching noise when you use your brakes. And this you would hear all the time while your car is moving. So that's and it could really damage your brake disc. So that's definitely something to look at, and if it needs to be done, then like I said, if you hear that screeching noise, that would definitely have to be replaced. If you don't want to replace it, then what I did with my old Saturn was I just cut around it. I pretty much just pulled it back as much as I can. I think I'm gonna do it here. I'm gonna just pretty much break it off. I just push it as back as I can until it started getting loose, and I just did that all the way around until this thing came off. I just pretty much pushed it back and pretty much just try to kind of wiggle it out and just make it even weaker than it is now. And let me see if I can get a back shot. I bet you the back is probably bad here. So yeah, that's pretty much what I thought. You can look at that back part, the one in front, that's the brake disc, and that back part, that's that dust cover I was talking about. And you can see the bottom part there, and a little bit on the top part there, the rust the rust has completely eaten through the metal, and it is pretty much loose. Okay. Show you guys here. So yeah, so before I finish up, I'm just gonna break that off. Alright guys, so the retaining nut is 3/4 and the Allen wrench is 4.5 millimeters. So obviously I'm not gonna, the Allen wrench here is just to hold it straight, because I believe that's just the thread coming out of the dust, the rubber dust boot from the switch link, and the bolt is just going around it counterclockwise, lefty loosey. So this has to stay straight, but this has to move to the left or counterclockwise. It's pretty rusted on this, so I'm gonna have to get something hard. In this case, I'm gonna just use another wrench or a crescent wrench and just smack it hard. I can't do this on camera because I need both hands. Okay, so I got it to the point where it's loose. So now I just gotta hold it with one hand, the Allen wrench in one hand, and try to move the wrench without moving the Allen wrench like that. So we want to keep this Allen wrench straight without moving, but that's a little bit too much space. I can't do that. Without moving, but while moving the key wrench like that. Like that. Alright, so on the back, I couldn't fit a socket on it, so I just used a wrench, and that is a 3/4. And up on the front, I used a 7/8. I'm going to use a 7/8. And on the back, I'm going to use my electric impact gun to get that loose and attach it to the socket. And that should be for the top one and for the bottom one as well. Okay, so I got a deep impact socket that I'm going to use, and so let me go ahead and attach my electrical impact wrench, and we'll get started taking off these bolts. Okay, so I got the first bolt out. If you see, they have these ridges. Let's try to focus in here. And this helps grab into the steering knuckle a lot better. This is a special bolt. I forgot what the name of it was, but these little ridges here are holding it in there. So the same thing is on the bottom. I don't have my my larger hammer with me, so I'm using a nail hammer. So right up. So yeah, and then I also put a jack underneath just to hold it. Alright guys, I just wanted to go over this. This is a hammer specifically just for driving in nails when you're doing any type of carpentry work. This is a mechanic's hammer, or a 3-pound, I believe it's a 3-pound hammer. This hammer is much more suitable for working on cars because the steel that's on this hammer here is much more durable and stronger. So whenever you work on a car, try to get a 3-pound hammer. I think this is like a 1/2 pound or 1.5 pound, but either way, leave these for when you're driving in nails, and this type of hammer when you're working on your car. Alright, so now that we got the strut detached from the steering knuckle, now we're going to be working here in the back. So this is what it looks like when you pull. This is what it looks like when you pull the trunk, I guess, lining cover away from the frame from where the strut's connected to. This little rubber covering here is pretty much just. Let me see if I can get this to the car. So you're just gonna pull that right off. Once you pull that off, you have these bolts right here. You have one, you have another one in the back, the third one that you have to get loose, and then from there the strut doesn't have anything attaching it to the car. You can take it right off. Alright guys, so I got the rear strut out, and I'm gonna replace it with a new one. And as you can see, it was pretty rusted out. All that rust came out after I pushed the rubber boot back, and all that rust was inside of there. Anyway, so right now, so this is how the new one looks. And I mean, the coil might be a little bit, might seem a bit rusty, I guess, but I think I'm gonna use this either way. Anyway, and the rest of the hardware I'm pretty much gonna use as well. So when you get the new strut, it's pretty much under tension. So all you want to do is, all you're gonna want to do, in your way, just push this back in, and then move it counterclockwise, and it comes out fully extended. Want to make sure that it pretty much stays nice and clean. And so yeah, in order for me to do this job, I have to use this spring compressor. So this spring compressor you could either buy, rent, or borrow from any auto parts store, and it's pretty simple. You're gonna put the spring, you're gonna put the coil inside of those. You're gonna pull these pins back on both sides. And you're gonna put the springs inside of these notches, and you're gonna put them on opposite ends of the spring. And then once this catches, the bolt catches it, you're gonna be screwing it down till it catches the top. And then as you keep screwing it down with either a socket wrench or your impact wrench, it'll start pushing it down. And you push one side a bit, then you move to the other side, you push that side a bit. And that's pretty much how you and you keep doing that until you compress the spring enough to where it's just and you keep doing that until there's a gap in between the upper part of the coil and the upper bushing housing right here. And then you can loosen it up, or you can just completely compress it all the way as far as you can. You can go further. I just usually do it till there's like a small gap, and then after that, and once you have clearance there, then you can go ahead and start taking off the upper bolt right there, and then everything pretty much just comes off, and then you put it back on. And then you put everything back on backwards onto the new strut. And yeah, it's pretty simple. And then you can go ahead and reattach the strut to the car. Just a quick tip: to be able to line up your coils properly up with your rubber mounts, just get some white out. Just get some white out or anything that'll make a mark to be able to see afterwards, and just line them up. Line up your coil to your rubber mounting hardware, so that way when you put it back on, it matches and you have no issues. Alright guys, so I compressed the coil. hopefully you can see that, but once there's space in between the coil and the upper rubber mounting, then that means that it's good to come off. Also on the bottom, before they were flush, the metal was completely touching the rubber, so that means it's uncompressed, and now I can take off the upper nut here. So when you put on the coil compressor, it doesn't necessarily have to be completely compressed. You can go halfway, make sure everything's on correctly and it's safe, and then you can take it off and just try to do everything carefully and slowly, because you got to remember the coil right now is under tension. So if you mess up, you drop the coil while you're walking in between your workrooms or your workroom and your garage, and that drops, it can come loose, it could break off, and then that coil could really do damage, so just be careful. Alright guys, so I had to do a few things, and I found out a few things. Now, let me start off. When I had to take out the top nut, I guess the shaft, the rod, it kept spinning, so I had to put a pair of vice grips on it to hold it, and then I was able to loosen up the top bolt. I also found out that whenever I drove my car, it felt very bouncy in the back, and it was also hearing some type of screeching noise, which kind of proved my thought when I was trying to take off the nut you having to use the vice grips, was that the shaft was just loose. It was kind of broken, but it ended up being the coil. I'm not sure you can see that, but that's where the coil broke. That part right there is where this was attached to that, and so it was sitting flush against the rubber hardware right here. You can still see some of the metal parts on there still attached to the rubber. Anyway, and also, taking off this rubber mount, I had to first take off this bolt, and so it was attached like that. After I took off the bolt, this metal part was still on there very tight, so I put the bolt back inside. I thought maybe it was still compressed, so I was a little bit nervous. So for my safety, I put this bolt back inside, and so it was on the threads, and then I used just a key wrench and just hit the back of it, and then this just came loose. Then it just started coming loose. So then I pulled that off, and then this was still attached to the coil, like it wasn't coming loose. So I had to do the same thing. I grabbed the wrench and I gave it a smack, and I smacked it right on the rubber mounting, maybe 2 or 3 times, and it started coming loose. And now you can see it's completely loose, and it'll come off. I just have to lift it up, and I'm using one hand. I have to lift the whole thing, and then I can take this off. But yeah, so that came loose. So for this repair, it ended up being not just the shocks, but also the coils that I had to replace. So instead of doing all this, I might just end up returning the strut and just get a quick strut. And with the coil and the strut and all that assembled, because I don't know any auto parts stores here that just sell the coil. So, and as you can see, the rubber mounting pretty much has to be replaced on both ends, and also the little dust boot there, I should probably replace that. So I'm gonna just buy the whole quick strut assembly and just replace it there. It's gonna be a little bit more. I was quoted for around $130, $140 each, with the shock, with the strut itself, with just the shock attached, cost $62. So I'm assuming, and if I was to order the coil online, I think it would have been around $50, and then the attachments for both sides would have been $35.99. So it just made sense for me to it would just make sense and save me a whole lot of hassle if I just go ahead and buy just the quick strut itself. But at least you know now, if one of the symptoms for your car, for you wanting to do your repairs, isn't just that the rear end of your car is kind of bouncy, and you start hearing screechy noises, and you look under your car and you can't find anything that's broken, that's the reason. It's your coil. Your coil most likely broke. I could not see it underneath the car because completely compressed, this part of the metal is completely flush with the rubber mount, and this metal piece was sitting underneath, so most likely you wouldn't be able to see it. Now if this was still attached and good, this would be flush to the rubber mount, and then this would be a little bit more separated from this part, just like how these springs are. This part would have been the part that would have been flush to the rubber housing here. Alright guys, so I went out and I bought a quick strut. There's the old strut, there's a broken coil right above it, and this is the new quick strut. It pretty much comes attached with the coil and the strut and all the mounting hardware already attached to the strut itself. So the quick strut costs $130 at my local auto parts store, and the naked strut costs $65. If you want this job to be quick, or if you don't have the necessary tools, then I would just go ahead and buy the quick strut. It is about double the price of what the naked strut would cost. But like I said, if you're in a pinch, like you don't have that much time, or you just don't have all the necessary tools, then you just go ahead and buy the quick strut, take out the old one, put the new one in, and you're done. If you want to save twofold on the price, then I would just consider buying a naked strut and then getting a coil compressor, and then moving the necessary parts from the old strut onto the new strut.